If you've been anywhere near the world of GameMaker in the last few weeks, you'll be well aware with the fact that the new audio effects system is sort of the next big thing that everybody's been talking about for a little while when it comes to GameMaker. And there's been people who've requested that I go over how that works, and I definitely want to, but since I don't really like jumping into anything in the middle, and I haven't actually made any videos on like regular basic audio playback so far, this feels like a good time to do that. I will get into things that you can do with the fancy new audio effects, hopefully soon, later this weekend if I can make time for it. But to start with, let's just talk about basic sound effects and background music playback. So this is what you see is the basic. I like to call it my basic 2D demo project. You may have seen it before in previous videos. It's not super exciting. We've got basic character controls. You can walk left, right, up, down. You can hit the spacebar to talk to the NPCs in some capacity. And there's a little bit of code related to drawing the correct frame of animation when you do various animation things. The original version of this demo actually does have some background music and some sound effects in it, but I have taken those out for the purposes of this video because that's what we're going to be working on today. So when you first load Ascend into GameMaker, you'll see a form that's a little bit like this. Normally when you just add an asset to GameMaker, like a sprite or whatever, you don't really have to worry about the file properties, unless you want to get into like more advanced GameMaker use. But when you load a basic sound effect or a piece of background music into GameMaker, you may wish to set a particular attribute. And that relates to how it is stored on the disk in the game. Generally speaking, when it comes to background music, you want to set this to compressed streamed, and for the most part that should be fine. And for regular sound effects, I will play, by the way. That's just a little simple jingle that I use for various GameMaker things. There are some of these other sound effects that I have. I'll play them all in sequence for you. That's a sound effect that is going to happen when you talk to an NPC. That is a sound effect which I am going to play when you do things such as walk around. And that is a sound effect that is going to play when you cast a spell. And for simple sound effects like this, most of the time you want to set the attribute to uncompressed, not streamed. The difference is that compressed stream sound effects will be stored in, when you build the game, they'll be stored as an OGG audio file, and the game will not load them into memory, but it will stream them directly from the disk when they're played. And sound effects that are set to uncompressed, not streamed, will be stored as a basically a raw wave file, and they will be loaded straight into memory when the game starts.
Hey.
And that's fine for simple sound effects that are only a second or so long. These sound effects tend to only be a few kilobytes or so in size, whereas longer pieces of music, such as background music, if you try to load those all into memory at the same time, you're going to find that your game's memory usage is going to start to go pretty high pretty quickly. So now that we've got some basic audio properties set up, I can go into the create event for the player, for example, and I can simply say audio play sound. And this is the main audio playback function. There are others, but this one will be fine in a lot of cases. And we can pass in a couple arguments. One is going to be the ID of the sound that we're going to play, so that's going to be, for example, for background music, BGM idle is what I've chosen to call it. Next, there is the priority. I am just going to set this to 100 for now, and I will go and monologue about that a little bit at the end of the video. And there is going to be a true-false boolean for whether or not this is going to loop. If you set this to false, the sound will play once until it completes, and then it'll stop. If you set this to true, the sound will play until it completes, and then it'll loop back to the beginning automatically. This is most of the time what you want to do for background music, unless you're really getting fancy with like adaptive tracks. And if you want to create an adaptive soundtrack, you would be doing something different in the game to begin with, but anyway, we now have background music playing, and I can let that go. If I were to let that go to the end, it's about 30 seconds long. You'd hear it loop back to the beginning. I'm not going to do that. You might notice at the bottom here, or when you mouse over the audio play sound function with feather enabled, that there are a few optional arguments. These are actually new. These were not in GameMaker more than I think they were added, I want to say about 2 or 3 months ago. And these optional arguments relate to various various other properties of the sound. The one that gets used most often, I think, is going to be the gain. And this is the volume. You can, of course, set the volume of a played sound through code elsewhere, but to make it nice and easy, if you want to play a sound at a reduced volume, you can simply set the gain parameter in the audio play sound function, and this will, for example, set the volume of the sound as it plays to 25%. This is a number between 0 and 1. 0 is the sound is going to be muted, and 1 is going to be the sound is playing at 100% volume. If I were to run this, the background music would be playing at a quarter volume. You hear that's much lower. Going above 1 isn't really going to work. I don't think I can set this to 2 and have it do anything. Yeah, that's just the default volume, isn't it? Let's just set that back to 1. Excellent. And next we have the offset. If you want to play a sound from somewhere other than the start, and honestly I can't think of many reasons you would want to do that, you can set the offset of the sound. So if we want the background music to only start, let's say 10 seconds into the loop, we can set the offset value to 10, and the background music will start midway through. And you can hear we're jumping into the middle. Again, I can't think of many reasons you'd want to do that, but I'm sure some of the audio engineers out there can think of some. Next, there's the pitch. I'm going to set that to 0. The pitch and the tempo of the played sound sort of go hand in hand. GameMaker doesn't really give you a way to separate the playback speed and the playback pitch. So if you wanted to play this at, let's say 1.5x speed, we could set the pitch to 1.5, and we're going to have the sound pitched up by a certain amount, and we're going to also have it playing back more quickly. It sounds very funny. This sounds like 1920s, like silent film Charlie Chaplin music, honestly. I love it. I was actually expecting that to sound way stupider, but I kind of like that. Anyway, you heard there that both the pitch of the sound and the playback tempo were increased. And if you wanted to slow it down a little bit, let's make this a little bit slower, 50%, and have it pitched down. I'm just gonna let this go. I feel like when this is playing like this, like the entire game should be in slow motion, but Delta time is a subject for another day. So that's pitch. You can use this to various creative effects. And lastly, there's the listener mask. This feels like something that I should just leave entirely until I talk about audio emitters and listeners in a future video. So I think for now, I'm just going to say ignore the listener mask and pretend it doesn't exist. So this is the background music. I think I might actually leave this at like plus 25% tempo and pitch. Just because I like that more than I probably should. Alright. I hope that doesn't get annoying. Next, we have some simple one-off sound effect audio playback functions, and it's actually the same function. It's just going to be the audio play sound function, but used in a different way. And by different way, let's say if I were to go and talk to this is the block of code that initializes like an NPC response. If I were to go in here when the player talks to an NPC, we could say audio play sound. We can call it sc_talk. We can give the priority 100. I will, again, describe exactly how that works later. And loop is just going to be set to false, and I'll leave all the optional parameters alone for now. So now if I were to go and run up to one of these dogs. Okay, so this is actually getting a little bit distracting. And I want to be able to like make sure that the talking like clinking sound effect is able to be heard. So there we go. I can talk to you and I can play sound. And likewise, you can mess with all the same optional parameters as before. You can mess with the volume, you can mess with the offset. I don't know why you'd want to do that for a sound effect that's probably less than half a second long. You can mess with the pitch, which is possibly a little bit more useful here when it comes to sound effects like this than it is when it comes to background music. I will get to that in a minute. let's see. Next, I believe I've actually got a like spellcasting animation. We don't have any magic effects or anything gameplay like that in this demo, but we've got an animation. So if I wanted to play, for example, audio, play sound, we could say sc_cast. Priority is 100. Loops is going to be false again, and this will allow us to press the C key on the keyboard. And that will begin that casting animation and also play the sound effect. It's actually not, the sound effect isn't completely synchronized with the casting animation. Like the sound effect plays at the beginning of the casting animation, which doesn't really make much sense gameplay wise. But timing these sound effects to particular frames of animation is sort of a whole separate adventure that I'm not going to get into today. And lastly, I have sc_grass, which I said is going to be something that plays when you walk around. And I could say that if you're the speed that you're moving in is not equal to 0, so if you're moving, we could say audio, play, sound, sc_grass. Priority is going to be 100. Loops is going to be false. This is going to get to be a little bit of an auditory nightmare. And you can probably guess why. Fortunately, it's not too loud, but you should be able to figure out pretty quickly what's going on, and that is that this sound effect is being played on every single frame that your speed is not 0, and that's basically as long as you're holding down a direction key on the keyboard, which isn't really what you want. So there's a couple solutions to that, and maybe a few more that you might think of if you're creative about it, but I'm simply going to say if not audio is playing sc_grass, then audio plays sound, and this is a fairly simple bit of logic. First, if the sound effect is already playing, it will not start another instance of that sound, and that will have the sound only play once at a time, and then once it finishes, audio is playing for the sound effect will be false, and we will be able to play a new instance of it. And if I were to run the game now, it would sound a lot better. Maybe the fact that we're making like grass crunchy sounds when we're walking on something that looks like water is a little bit weird, but other than that, it does the trick. So there's a whole bunch of other audio functions. I am going to actually move this over to the step event as well, the background music, and I'm going to attach this, I think, to keyboard press. So I might say if keyboard check pressed VK enter feels like a good key to pick on. We could say audio play sound, BGM idle, priority 100, loop set to true. This will spawn infinite copies of the sound playing at once, which is going to be not a lot of fun to listen to. So I can make this a toggle instead. For example, I can say if audio is playing, BGM idle, else, and we're going to have, if the audio is already playing, we're going to say audio stop sound, BGM idle. And this will allow me to basically toggle the background music on and off with the enter key. Wonderful. And when I hit the enter key, it restarts. We have a couple other audio functions, and this is the point in the video where I'm probably just going to start reciting function names. There are a lot of them. If you type audio underscore and then control space and bring up this list of audio related things, there is an awful lot of audio related code in GameMaker, and there's only going to be more of it in the future as Yo-Yo Games gets around to adding more audio effects and that sort of thing. A lot of these I'm not going to talk about now. I said I would go over things like emitters and listeners and that sort of thing later. There's the whole matter of audio groups, which I think are a lot of fun and don't get talked about nearly as much as they should for how cool they are. There are, of course, audio effects, which I said I would try to get to soon because everybody's interested in those right now. And some other things. You can, of course, scroll through this list. You can click on something that grabs your interest. You can hit F1 over it, and you can open up the GameMaker manual entry on it. The ones that I'm interested in are pretty basic. We're not going to be doing any fancy audio effects today. So you can pause audio without stopping it completely, much like video and time sources and that sort of thing. If you say audio, what is it? Audio pause sound. And by the way, you might have noticed that a bunch of the sound-related functions have, for example, audio pause all. There's audio stop all. A couple of the playback-related audio functions. I believe there's also audio resume all. Yeah. A couple of the audio playback functions have versions for individual sounds or all sounds, and you can use them as appropriate. However, I can say audio pause sound, BGM idle. And let's see, let's get rid of the stop function. If the audio is playing, we're going to pause it. Else, if the audio is already paused, I can say audio is paused. This one does not have an all version, because it doesn't really make sense to check if multiple sounds are paused at once. BGM idle. We can say audio resume sound. BGM idle. And lastly, if the audio is not playing and the audio is not paused, we can just play it from the beginning. And that will allow us to create, instead of a start and stop toggle, a pause and resume toggle. So we started, we paused, and it's not resuming. Did I miss a... Oh, you know what? I know what this is. So audio is playing will still return true if the sound is, or has been playing but has been paused. And what I actually would want to do to make this toggle work is switch these around. So if audio is paused, we're going to resume the sound. Else, if the audio is playing, we're going to pause the sound. And if the audio is not playing at all, we are going to play the sound from scratch. Okay, brain fart. That one took me a minute to see what was happening. So playing, paused, resumed. Alright, this is the part where the pianos are playing. We should be able to hear it picking up from the pianos. Wonderful. So if you ever wanted to make like an MP3 player in GameMaker, there you have it. Now, there are, for all of the additional optional arguments to the audio play sound function, a couple additional setter and getter functions related to those particular properties of sounds. If you type audio sound underscore, you can see the list of them. So audio sound pitch, audio sound gain, those map pretty cleanly one-to-one onto the optional arguments. Audio sound get gain to get the current volume of the sound, relatively speaking. Get listener mask, again, don't worry about listener masks for now. Get pitch, get track position if you want to figure out where in a sound it's currently playing from, so how much of the music has played, for example. Audio sound length. I guess if you really wanted to make an MP3 player in GameMaker, you could you would need to use get track position and get length to draw the track bar, and you could also use set track position to seek to an exact time in the sound if you wanted to. But as for practical applications, if you wanted to audio sound gain, this function actually does a little bit more than what you can just do with the audio play sound function. This gives you the option to fade a sound to a volume over a certain amount of time. So if you wanted to fade in or fade out or something like that, you would use the audio sound gain function. And you could say the index is going to be BGM idle. The level is going to be 1 for 100%. And the time is going to be in milliseconds. I'm going to set that to 5,000. The fact that some of the timing values in GameMaker for things like sounds are in seconds, such as, I believe, the playback offset, and the fact that some other time-related functions in GameMaker deal in milliseconds, such as audio sound gain, is a little bit annoying. And I honestly wish that Yo-Yo Games would have just, settled on one or the other. And I don't even care which, as long as it was consistent. But regardless, you can audio sound gain to 100% over the course of 5,000 milliseconds. A little bit of a irritating detail that I observed with this is that if you audio play sound at 0 volume and then try to set the gain to 1 over 5,000 milliseconds, I've not observed that this will actually work. So I hit the enter key, but I don't hear anything, and it's going to be playing, but it's still going to be at 0 volume. From what I can tell, and I don't know if there's a less annoying way to do this, and I don't know if this is something that counts as a bug that Yo-Yo Games wants to fix eventually or something, but if you want to do something like this and fade in the sound, you're going to have to manually set the sound gain to 0 after you start playing it, and then you can have it fade into 100%. Very nice. And again, I don't know if that's a bug, I don't know if that's intentional for whatever reason, but be aware of it. Okay, I think that is all the basic audio functions that I want to talk about. There is a little bit more to do with these functions, however, that I'd like to go over, and that is that so far I've dealt with all of these sounds in just by referring to the asset name, so se_grass, bgm_idle. However, the audio play sound function, if you either F1 over it to bring up the manual entry in GameMaker, or if you just the F1 key is great. If you mouse over it with feather, you can see that it will actually return a value, and that is going to be a sound ID. So the same way that you have object types in GameMaker, for example, obj_player, and you would instantiate instances of an object type in the game, you have sound types, and you could think of the sound resources, the sound assets in the asset browser as the object. When you say audio play sound, you will create an instance of that sound. And you can use this to refer back to individual instances of a sound. And this can be useful if you want to do something like set the volume of individual sounds individually, and you don't want all playing instances of BGM idle to have the same volume or anything like that. You could say, let's say sound ID is going to be the return value of audio play sound. And you could pass this sound instance ID to any of the audio related functions. And in fact, if you mouse over them, you will see that pretty much all of the sound related functions will say that they take a parameter of either an asset.gm sound, which is one of these things, or an index, which is an id.sound, which is going to be an instance. And boy, Feather is great, because when I used to make these videos, if I wanted to show something like this in the documentation, I would have had to open the manual, which is kind of long and clunky, and now all I have to do is mouse over the function name and it'll show the Feather help. Anyway, if I were to run this, we're going to see that we're going to audio play sound bgm_idle, and then when we refer to that instance of the sound later, by using the sound ID, then it'll still work. Obviously, you cannot pass a sound ID to the audio play sound function itself. That doesn't really make sense. If you're curious about exactly what a sound ID is, I believe it's just a number the same way that an instance ID is. And all right, yeah, that is going to be 400,001. I wonder. These just count up by 1, right? So if I were to walk around in the grass a little bit and play some other sounds first. Not that that should matter to you as the programmer. It's not like you should ever be doing like math on anything related to these sound IDs or anything like that. For all intents and purposes, this should just be a pointer as far as you care. But I was just curious. And let's see. In the future, when I do more elaborate, like, follow along, let's make a game projects, I would like to do more with sounds playback like this. I guess, should I make that clean? Say sound ID is a local variable instead of just being a dangling instance variable. So sound priority, which I did say I would circle back to eventually. So your computer can only play a finite number of sounds at one time, and in modern computers that limit tends to be pretty high. It's not like the old 8-bit console days where you were limited to, I think, playing like 2 pulse codes at the same time, plus like 1 bass track in the background or something like that. Generally speaking, you can play a lot of sounds at once before anything bad starts to happen in GameMaker in the modern day. But there is still a limit, and if you want to make sure that some sounds are always able to be heard, you would want to give them a higher priority. And what exactly those priority numbers are entirely up to you. So I usually set like my default sound priority to 100, and then if I want a sound to get a higher priority than that, I might set, for example, the priority of the background music to 200, and that will ensure that the background music is always heard, even if there are a lot of sounds playing at once. And if you want to set a sound priority to a lower priority, so maybe there's a sound that's playing far away from the player, like an enemy that's far away is walking through the grass and it's not that important that you're able to hear it, compared to an enemy that's like right next to you, you might want to set that sound priority to a lower number, such as 10. And that will give you a little bit of control over which sounds are actually played. This isn't something that often becomes a concern in GameMaker because usually people who make GameMaker games aren't making a big, huge, massive world with big, huge, massive soundscapes. But people who are, let's say, a little bit more auditorially inclined in GameMaker might be interested in creating a soundscape like that, and you might actually care about assigning priorities to sounds. If I were to run the game now, you would hear that even though each of these sound effects does have a different priority, they're all playing. If I can actually, like, catch this guy. There you go. And the priority of the sound isn't coming into effect anywhere here because we're only playing a couple sounds at once at most. And the scale is completely arbitrary. Like I said, I usually give it a scale of 100 being the normal priority, and something higher than that is going to be high priority, and something lower than that is going to be low priority. You could just as easily set that to a scale of like 1 is the normal priority, and something higher might be 1.5 and something lower might be 0.5. It's up to you, as long as it's consistent within your project. So that's it for basic audio in GameMaker. Audio tends to be something that gets put off until the last possible second when people are making games. I should know, I always leave audio off to the last possible second. But it is worth doing well because having audio in your game can add a lot to the game world and making it feel like a real game, a real place, a real experience. It's definitely worth doing well, just as much as gameplay or visuals. And hopefully this video is enough to give you at least a solid foundation on how to do that. But for now, I'm gonna end this off here. My name is Michael, I like wizards and dragons and making games. I try to post about 2 game dev videos a week, one tutorial like this, and one let's make a game, although that just finished, so I might be doing 2 tutorials for a little while until I spin up another game dev project. Anyway, I have a Patreon, so if you want to contribute to the channel, links to that can be found in all the usual places. Otherwise, I hope you all found that useful, and I will see you all later. Special thanks to Army Armbuster, DJ Gibbles, Edward Holt, GameMaker, Harold Guidry, Jonathan Bernardez, Kiexi, Cinder Larson, Squarecrowd, The Oz, and Zenjamin for supporting these videos. If you want to support the channel, head on over to the Patreon page down in the video description to join the fun.